128. The Meaning of the Sabbath. Chalcedon Position Paper number 20, February 1981. Men commonly sin even in their professed obedience to God by reducing God's law to the lowest common denominator, or to its minimal meaning. The law, "Thou shalt not steal," Exodus chapter 20, verse 15, covers every form of theft. Robbing another man, robbing God of his tithes and offerings, Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 to 12, the debasement of coinage and inflation, Isaiah chapter 1, verse 22, and much, much more. Men find it convenient to limit the law to simple theft. This means that a man who produces or sells shoddy merchandise under false pretenses, or a man who does not work to earn his pay, but rather does as little as possible, can claim that they are not thieves. In God's sight, however, and in His court, the full meaning of the law prevails. A key mistreated law is the Sabbath law. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labour and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 11. Before beginning a study of these words, 2 things need to be understood. First, the commandment is to rest, not worship. Worship is to be a continuous fact, as well as a weekly one. But the central aspect of the Sabbath observance is rest. Second, many have limited this observance of rest to their definitions. The Pharisees strictly limited the number of feet a man could walk on the Sabbath and had precise rules of limitation on every activity. On the other hand, many today see the Sabbath as a day for their personal relaxation and leisure. Neither is right. To understand the Sabbath, we must see first what it involves. It means a weekly day of rest, 1 day in 7. The Hebrew Sabbath began on the sundown of the night before, and it continued until dawn of the next day. Many Puritans observed a like Sabbath. The Sabbath rest included the work animals and also the earth, which, with man, had to rest 1 year in 7. The faculties of universities still are allowed a sabbatical year, but for the most part, this observance has fallen into disuse. We need to work for its restoration. The 50th year was also a Sabbath, the Jubilee. Now, consider the meaning of all this as it relates to time. Every 7th day, every 7th year, and every half-century another year were set aside for rest. The implications of this were far more radical in those days than now. Except for works of necessity, that is, where continuous operation was required as in milking, or works of mercy, rest was mandatory. Since production of food was then more marginal than now, it was far more difficult to store up sufficient food reserves for a sabbatical year. There was a further aspect to the Sabbath, a rest from debt. Debts had to be for a 6-year term only, or a fraction thereof, if the Sabbath year were closer. An obvious fact now appears. A society observing the Sabbath had to be provident, and it could not be inflationary. To earn enough and to produce enough, to make work unnecessary 8 years out of 50, and on over 2,000 weekly Sabbath days as well, almost 6 years more in aggregate, making almost 14 out of 50 years given to the waking Sabbath rest. Rest required a future-oriented and provident people. Such a people must be willing, able, and productive workers. They must be able to plan and use wisely their time and wealth. To observe the Sabbath was a mark of character and more. Even further, a society in which death is limited to 6 years, Deuteronomy chapter 15 verses 1 to 6, is a society which is anti-inflationary. Add to this the requirement of just monetary weights, Leviticus chapter 19 verses 35 and 36, and inflation is virtually impossible. The result is social stability and prosperity. A society, thus, which observes the Sabbath can truly rest in the Lord. Its todays and tomorrows are circumscribed by God's law, and therefore God's blessing and providential care. Furthermore, such a society is free from anxiety. With most men, today and tomorrow are matters of anxiety. Their failure to be provident, their participation in a lawless society, and the uncertainty of their future lead to a neurotic and anxious frame of mind. It is foolishness to believe that counseling or spiritual exercises can remove an anxiety which is a product of lawlessness. A lawless people will always be an anxious people. We are confronted today with a constant flow of books aimed at relieving anxiety, and psychotherapy is a big business. But few work at the root problem of anxiety, sin and guilt before God, and a failure to trust in His law and government. Basic to the Sabbath and its rest is liberation from work. The root of this liberation is faith. Faith in the Lord and His covenant salvation. To cease from our labours to so great an extent as the law requires on the one hand a provident and diligent life, and on the other a deep trust in God's work. The Lord, having given us His covenant salvation, is able to give us His covenant care. The nation, to have God's blessing, must observe this covenant sign, which means that the goal is not only a weekly observance, but the observance of the sabbatical year of rest, so that all God's people may rest and rejoice in Him. This is a legal, national duty and requirement. When we cease from our labours, we rest in the Lord's accomplished work of salvation and His ongoing work of providential care. It is a rest in which we commit ourselves and all our being into God's hands. David says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass." Psalm 37, verse 7. In terms of this resting in the Lord, William Whiting Borden, 1887 to 1913, wrote in his notebook in freshman year at Yale, "Lord Jesus, I take hands off as far as my life is concerned. I put Thee in the throne in my heart." Mrs. Howard Taylor, Borden of Yale, 09, page 123. The Sabbath is liberation because it frees us from ourselves and our work in the confidence of God's superior government and work. It is liberation from history as the determining agent, because it affirms God's determination of all things. The opposite of the Sabbath is the Hindu doctrine of karma. According to this doctrine, man is a captive of his past, of his history, and he is inescapably bound to the past. Only through a long series of many, many reincarnations can he free himself from history into death. The Sabbath does not deny causality, but whereas karma says causality is essentially historical, the Sabbath and its rest are a triumphant witness to the fact that causality is primarily supernatural. The Sabbath is blessed and hallowed by God above all other days and years as a witness to its liberating character and its witness to his supernatural government and providence. The Sabbath is separated from other days, and thus we too must separate ourselves from all our other days and activities. When we reduce, as is so commonly done, the day to a church Sabbath, we deny the necessity for the separation of the whole of man and his society to the Lord. This is why the Sabbath applies to all things: ourselves, our land, the aliens in our midst, church, state, and all things. For the state to deny the Sabbath is to deny God. Biblical law separates, while making them interdependent, church and state. It does not separate the Sabbath and the state. There is, however, a further and basic meaning to the Sabbath. As we have seen, it requires both faith and providence on the part of man. Man must live so that he can rest in the seventh year without an income. He must rest, apart from works of necessity, and must do so without anxiety. Clearly, covenant man must be future-oriented and provident. He must, however, be also present-oriented. The Sabbath is a celebration of God's present order and his ever-present help. Psalm 46 gives us this kind of faith. In the midst of cataclysmic earthquakes, floods, and desolations, the word for faith is, "Be still, and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth." Psalm 46, verse 10. It is knowing that the Lord of hosts is with us. Psalm 46, verse 11. And that it is his righteous judgment that shakes our world. The things that are being shaken, so that only those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 27. It means knowing that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Psalm 118, verse 24 declares, "This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." The commandment orders us to keep the Sabbath because, "In 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is." Exodus chapter 20, verse 11. God, having created all things, has no problem in the government of all things. In the midst of our world's miseries, which are his judgments, we can rest in his government. The Sabbath is a celebration of the present day, in the face of all things, in the certain knowledge that it is God's ordained day, and we are members of his covenant. Therefore, rejoice. Karma and the Sabbath. The world of karma is a world without God and without rest. Hinduism has no Sabbath, and no naturalistic faith can have a true Sabbath. In a naturalistic world, man is caught in tension between two conflicting facts. First, if there is no God, everything depends upon man. If everything depends on man, then man must be at the command post of his life continuously, night and day, awake and asleep. The psychological implications of this are enormous. Rest is precluded, and humanistic man is plagued with insomnia, an inability to rest while seeking it with intensity, and a nightmare-haunted life with things threatening to go out of control. Life is lonely at the top, especially if we live in a dead universe, and if we are all alone in our heart's concerns. Second, if man is alone in a dead universe, a world without God, he faces the relentless and blind workings of that universe. Things happen because they must happen, without any source in mind, reason, or purpose. This means that man's purposes work against a world of total purposelessness. It means, moreover, that an unrelenting and blind causality works against him. Hinduism calls this karma. Others have varying names for it. The sum total of a blind world's forces and past work against us and govern us. Heredity, the environment, our sins, the stars, our id, ego, superego, our primordial past, and much, much more controls us. Instead of being in control, we are controlled. Thus, a naturalistic worldview or faith tells us to be the captains of our souls and fate, but also tells us that we are the creatures of nature, karma, or what have you. The result is no rest. The Sabbath can only flourish with a living faith. It means knowing that the government of all things is on the Lord's shoulders, not ours. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. We can therefore rest in his government, providence, and care. We can also work in the magnificent assurance that our labor is not in vain or futile in the Lord. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58, Romans chapter 8, verse 28. If there is no God, there can be no rest. The wicked are like the troubled sea, when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. Isaiah chapter 57, verses 20 and 21. If we have peace and rest, we communicate it. We are then, at all times, a Sabbath people. If we do not have rest, then we are a restless and warring people. We are at war with God, with our neighbour, and with ourselves. We become a centre of unrest, and we radiate disturbance. We then create conflicts and try to justify them in the name of our principles. Men without a Sabbath rest as the principle of their lives are men without Christ, who is our true Sabbath. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 9 to 16. We rest in him who declares, Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. John chapter 14, verse 27. The Sabbath is thus much more than a day. It is the Lord, a faith, and a faithfulness. It is resting in him, and also living and working in him. Are you living under karma, or in the terms of the Sabbath?